Apologizing to a parent after a 5th grade lesson on slavery, a lesson that forced an African-American student to the mock auction block so white students could bid on him. 10 Investigates' Paul Aker joins us with the school's response. Paul?
That's right, Andrea. The school says only one parent was upset by this lesson, but that parent was really upset. And the student says he was humiliated by it.
Remember the soccer game?
At 10 years old, Nico Burton loves his dog, but he's not so fond of social studies, where yesterday he got a painful lesson in American history.
I ended up being a slave.
Nico says his teacher at Gahanna's Chapelfield Elementary divided the class and made some students slaves and others their masters.
At first I didn't really care, but after people were like bidding on people, it kind of made me a little mad and stuff.
Nico says it got worse when the so-called masters were told to feel the students playing slaves to see if they were worth buying.
They got to look at in your mouth and feel like your legs and stuff to see if you were strong or stuff.
And people were doing that to you?
Yeah.
He felt degraded, he was hurt. Kids picked on him later.
Nico's mom, Anika, says she's astonished.
I feel like that was totally inappropriate. It was racist and degrading.
Gahanna Jefferson School District officials declined to comment on camera, but a spokeswoman claims this was part of a state-required curriculum. She tells 10 Investigates it was a one-time lesson, and in a statement she wrote, "As soon as the concern was brought to our attention, school officials acted promptly to speak with the parent. Then, while we were at Nico's house, his principal called. We overheard his apology."
So I apologize for that. Definitely make sure that type of lesson doesn't happen.
I'm just shocked nobody has ever said anything about it.
While the family says the apology is nice, Nico says he's still waiting to hear one from his teacher.
And it was kind of mean, and she should have said sorry.
And we contacted the State Board of Education to find out what the law requires. It does call for 5th graders to have exposure to diversity education, but the law does not mention anything about mock slave auctions.
There was a sale of a black child by white children in the classroom.
Parents of 5th graders at schools in New Jersey are outraged after 2 slavery-related school assignments may have taken it too far. They say a mock slave auction was held by a substitute educator, while their regular teacher was out for a medical procedure.
You're demoralized. If you're sold on a block in 2017 in your 5th grade class, it may affect you for the rest of your life.
The issue was discussed at a recent Board of Education meeting.
I'm disgusted, really disgusted, that a child was bought. That doesn't make any sense.
A note from the principal about the project says the activity was not part of the curriculum, not part of the teacher's assignment, not condoned by the classroom teacher, and not authorized by the district. Around the same time, parents in another school district complained about a similar assignment. Students were asked to design posters replicating a slave auction. The superintendent has since sent out a letter saying we need to do a better job of acknowledging the uglier parts of our past so that children can learn the full story. Many offended parents took to Facebook saying, "I am mortified. These images actually hurt my heart. This is absolutely appalling and demeaning. We're a community built on diversity, not destructive ignorance and segregation." The public is split about the assignment.
I can see how out of context people would get angry about that. I can see it's a tough assignment.
I don't think the school should have allowed that at all.
The posters have been taken down, and the school plans to hold a town hall meeting to address concerned parents and students. For Inside
I'm getting teary-eyed about it because it's just like, how can somebody do this to my son?
Vernex Harding sat her 10-year-old son down for a tough conversation about cultural understanding. She's telling her story exclusively to Pix 11. Harding says her child was traumatized after a hands-on lesson about slavery. It felt all too real.
She told all the African-American students to raise their hands and proceeded with this exercise.
The exercise was a mock slave auction. Harding's son told her he and 2 other African Americans in their 5th grade class were brought into the hallway.
She started to put imaginary chains along our neck, our wrist, and our shackles on our ankles. And as soon as she did that, Mommy, I knew it was wrong.
When they were brought back into the classroom, they were lined up. The teacher then asked other students to start bidding to buy them.
She reiterated and said, you look like a wealthy white man. How about 300? Just started a bidding with the children.
The mock slave auction of African-American students happened Tuesday at the Chapel School in Bronxville. Parents are now livid and organizing. One sent us this email from the principal. He called the lesson racially insensitive and hurtful. A school investigation is now underway. For now, the social studies teacher who led the lesson has been removed from the classroom, and tonight, parents are being called to the school for emergency meetings. Our sources in the Attorney General's office tell us Letitia James is aware of the parents' concerns here, and the AG's office is now monitoring the school's response.
You need to take him out of public school. That's what you need to do. And I don't know what else has to happen to him or to other kids that you have to read about for you to finally do it. But you need to do it, because slowly but surely the confidence will be sucked out of him because of all these little things that are going to add up, that are going to happen to him, all because he's black. And that's the truth, okay? We all know in public school, a lot of the times, like I said, they just don't care. They don't care. And unfortunately, their job is really not to educate you anymore. It's to indoctrinate you. And, a lot of these public schools, they have interests in the private prisons. So they're directly doing certain things so that people can fall in line to go to prison. And if you don't know about the prison industrial complex, you need to Google that, because that is real. That is alive and breathing right now, training people right now, getting them ready for prison life.
Well, we started in Africa, started in Africa, started in Africa. Slaves, African in America, African in Europe.
It's the second time Jacqueline Johnson cried next to her son Kendrick's grave. The first time he was being lowered into the ground. This time he's being pulled out of it.
Did you ever expect you'd have to exhume his body?
No, I didn't expect to have to bury his body.
In June, Kendrick's body was sent to Florida. The Johnsons hired Dr. Bill Anderson to conduct an independent second autopsy. In that autopsy, Anderson told the Johnsons he'd found evidence that Kendrick died as the result of a blow to the neck and not accidental asphyxia, after slipping into a rolled gym mat at school, as investigators in Georgia had said. But what Dr. Anderson did not find shocked them.
When we got the body for the second autopsy, that organs, the heart, lungs, liver, etc., were not with the body.
The brain?
The brain, they were all absent.
Every organ from the top of Kendrick's head to his pelvis gone, and his family had no idea.
We have been let down again. And when we buried Kendrick, we thought we was burying Kendrick, not half of Kendrick.
I'm not sure at this point who did not return the organs to the body, but I know when we got the body, the organs were not there.
So CNN contacted the two entities that had custody of Kendrick's body and access to his organs: the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which conducted the first autopsy in January, and Harrington Funeral Home, which the Johnsons chose to embalm and prepare Kendrick's body for burial days later. A spokeswoman for the state tells CNN after its autopsy, the organs were placed in Johnson's body, the body was closed, then the body was released to the funeral home. State investigators say it's their normal practice, but what happened after his body arrived at the funeral home was anything but normal.
What was in the place of the organs?
Newspaper.
Newspaper.
Dr. Anderson showed me the pictures of Kendrick's body he'd taken during the second autopsy.
It's a Black Friday ad, JCPenney ad.
Yes.
Stuffing that newspaper in like it was a garbage can inside his body. It's unbelievable.
I'd imagine that that's a different kind of pain.
Yep.
Why do you think that there would be newspaper stuffed in your child?
I never heard of that before. Never.
Neither had the founder of a national embalming academy contacted by CNN, who said it's not consistent with the standards of care in the industry, nor had the president of the National Association of Medical Examiners, who told CNN he's never heard of this practice.
Why would the funeral home discard his organs and stuff them with newspaper?
The question is, why didn't he tell us?
So what exactly did the Harrington Funeral Home do with Kendrick's organs? And why was he stuffed with old newspaper? We went to their office to find out, but their response to us? No comment. However, in a letter to the Johnsons' attorney, Harrington Funeral Home owner Antonio Harrington denies he received Kendrick's organs. He writes in part, his internal organs were destroyed through natural process and henceforth were discarded before the body was sent back to Valdosta. It's another disappointing answer for parents determined to know what happened to their son before and now after his death. And they admit they're struggling.
Unbearable, just about. Only thing that wakes you up in the morning is just to keep pushing.
Victor Blackwell joins us now. This is unbelievable newspaper inside this young man's body. I understand there's an investigation into where Kendrick Johnson's organs went and why. What do we know about it?
Well, Anderson, we contacted the Georgia Secretary of State's office because they issued licenses to funeral homes. We wanted to check on the history of Harrington Funeral Home. And when we told them why we were calling, they decided that they too wanted to know where are Kendrick Johnson's organs, and they wanted to know more about this process, this practice of stuffing bodies with newspapers, something that they'd never heard of either.
How was the family's autopsy doctor able to determine the cause of death then?
Yeah, I asked him, if the organs aren't there, how can you determine how Kendrick died? Well, he says that essentially blunt force trauma was not in the organs, it was in the right side jaw, which was actually noted as bruised during the paramedics report on the day he was found. He dissected the jaw, which had not been dissected in the first autopsy, found bleeding under the skin. He dissected the left side as well, did not find the bleeding, and he concluded that that bruising indicated, also with the bleeding, that there was blunt force trauma, that Kendrick took that blow to the neck.
You know, Victor, one thing I hadn't noticed, and actually a viewer who works in gyms noticed and tweeted me about this the other day, was that it looks like all the mats are rolled really tightly, except for the one that Kendrick was found in. That seems to have had a large opening.
At the Atlanta home of 19th century writer Joel Chandler Harris, best known for his Uncle Remus African-American folk tales, Akbar Imhotep is keeping alive the oral tradition that inspired Chandler's books.
Listen to the words and help them grow.
This is part of a homeschooling support network in Cobb County, Georgia, just outside Atlanta.
This is not just any old house.
It was founded in 2016 by Amber Johnston, a business owner, wife, and mother of 4. She wanted to fill a need she saw for her daughters and for a burgeoning demographic in the homeschooling movement, African Americans. Johnston's group, which began with 2 families less than 2 years ago, has grown to 66 families.
I'm still shocked about it. It reminds me when I was growing up in the 80s, there was this cartoon called Thundercats. And when they needed to be called to action, they would say, Thundercats, 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 ho! And this light would go up in the sky and the other Thundercats would see it. That's what I feel like. I feel like I put a beacon light up in the sky in Cobb County, thinking that a few sprinkles of families might see it. And I've been overwhelmed by the response.
Across the nation, as many as 202,000 Black children are being homeschooled, up from about 105,000 in 2003. While white Americans still make up a majority of the 1.7 million homeschoolers, the percentage of African Americans is growing fast. They cite some of the same reasons for abandoning traditional schools that the larger homeschooling community does: negative school environments, including peer pressure, dissatisfaction with academics, and a desire to provide religious instruction.
Our Father who art in heaven.
But it wasn't just the family's faith that made the Johnstons look for alternatives. They were worried about the quality of the schools in their area. And there was another factor that gave them pause.
I started realizing that maybe we hadn't come as far along in race relations in the country as I thought that we had. that there seemed to be a lot of messed up stuff brewing underneath. And I was feeling very much like a mama bear. Like, hey, I don't know exactly what's going down here, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my child as I try to figure this out.
That was 4 years ago, and Johnston's daughters have been homeschooled ever since.
What does that mean?
If you don't work for your food, you can't get it.
The decision to home educate was strengthened in 2014 when Johnston found out she was having the first of her 2 boys. She was initially excited.
And my very second thought was, great, now I'm the mother of America's most hated. And what am I going to do with that? When I look at my little boys, I just see beauty. And the thought of putting them in an environment where one day they would be looked upon potentially and very likely as being less than, less smart, less deserving, less safe. And I just hear less.
Johnston isn't alone. Cheryl Field Smith, a professor of education at the University of Georgia, has heard from a lot of parents like Amber Johnston. In 2009, she published a study about Black homeschoolers. She found the vast majority cite perceptions of or experiences with racism in public and private schools as a reason for homeschooling.
The research shows us that we have discipline disproportionality where Black males are suspended 2 times more than their other counterparts. So that's not by accident. I think that's racism. I think that that's prejudice and assumptions that we're making about children.
Judy Sardin, who lives just outside of Atlanta, knows these kinds of assumptions all too well. Sardin and her husband, an architect, both went to public schools. She was an attorney making 6 figures when she decided to quit her job to teach her 2 kids, 10-year-old Aiden and 9-year-old Haley.
Kind of hard to imagine that person quitting their fancy corporate job and going home to be with their children.
It was 2012. Sardin says then 4-year-old Aiden had a tough year with one teacher in his Montessori class.
My son was reading at the time. He was young, but he was reading. And the other teachers had pushed him. Anything he showed an aptitude for, they had pushed him and helped him to develop it in a way that he enjoyed it. But this teacher, who had come from the public schools, didn't. And I begged her to, I sent her books to school that he was reading and asked her to encourage him and have him read to her, and she never did. There was no expectation that he should be able to read. And I could see kind of, the writing on the wall. I could see where we were going with his education, with him regressing the way he did that one year. It was drastic, and it was heartbreaking.
Keeping her kids home, Sardin says she is able to shape their curriculum. That includes history lessons they won't get in public school.
Depending on what state you're in, you learn about African enslavement in the Americas, or you don't learn about it at all. And basically, that is the history that all kids, Black and white, learn about Black people.
With her kids, she teaches a different way.
So we don't just learn about the Greek and Roman empires. We learn about the African civilizations. We learn about what's going on in the Americas. We get to learn about what's going on pretty much on every continent throughout history. So that by the time we get to modern times and we get to African enslavement in Americas, we've studied 4,000 or 5,000 years of world history, but especially African history. So that for my children, their history didn't just start 300 years ago here in the Americas. Their history started back in Africa.
We go hard on African American history and culture, and again, that's a reflection of just what I didn't know. I didn't know much about Africa. I thought Africa was a country,
Retired Air Force veteran Shiva Quinn lives in rural Byron, Georgia. She has been homeschooling her 2 daughters, 7-year-old Zariah and 6-year-old Anaya, for the past 4 years.
So 6 times 5 is what? 30. Okay.
Like Judy Sardin, Quinn emphasizes African American history and has added a personal touch, tracing her family's DNA to Ghana. And she's doing it on her own as a single mother.
Being a single parent is not easy on nobody. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. My day starts at 3 o'clock in the morning. I've been up since 3 o'clock in this morning, getting breakfast going, getting lunch on, because you can't afford to eat out every day. Like, who does that, right? So you have to be more engaged with your family.
Homeschooling can be costly. Like private school families, homeschoolers still must pay the local taxes that pay for public school, even though their kids are not enrolled. The cost of educational content can run into the hundreds, and funds for teaching tools like tablets and these programmable robots come directly out of parents' pockets. But with access to low-cost or free online lessons, Quinn says being a homeschooling single mom is possible. A combination of her Air Force pension, a job teaching a few online classes, and financial contributions from her ex-husband allows Quinn to stay at home. She decided to homeschool when teachers refused her request to give her then 4-year-old daughter advanced reading material. The decision was very much grounded in her family history.
I come from a family of illiteracy. And I wanted my kids to really know how to read well. And that was the whole, thing of it behind me when I say the schools wouldn't, push them. I'm like, I know they can do more. I know they can do better, but we're just going to do this and we're not going to do any more. And I'm like, no, like why she can't practice her sight words over the weekend, or why we can't read these books, or, why we had to just stop at this level. And when I found out that the teachers just were not working with me and trying to help me move my children forward, I was like, this is not going to work.
Professor Field Smith points to studies suggesting Shiva Quinn's experience is not unique. African American parents can face more resistance from schools than white parents when advocating for their children.
A lot of homeschoolers have had experiences in schools where the parents have tried to advocate for their children and they've experienced marginalization, and their child has experienced just not being able to be themselves. They're painted as troublemakers.
And being able to be yourself and embrace Black culture, says Amber Johnston, is part of what her homeschooling group is all about.
Sometimes, doggone it, we just want to go to Alvin Ailey and put on some Nina Simone and come home and just talk about stuff. And that's what we're able to do. So it's not against anyone as much as it is a support. And I really see it as a mental health system for our kids.
But not everyone sees it that way, she says. On social media, she's received some painful comments, particularly from those outside her Black community.
You're basically teaching racism to your kids, or your group is an example of reverse racism. And so I wish, that I could sometimes say, I wish you could walk in my shoes, because I know you're a passionate mother. And I know that if your little girl was heartbroken, you would start any kind of group you could to help her.
Investigation continues into the circumstances that led to a 5-year-old girl being handcuffed by police in Florida. St. Petersburg police were called to the Fairmount Park Elementary School after a little girl threw a temper tantrum. Well, the girl's mother says, there you can see the deputies coming in to handcuff her. The girl's mother says that handcuffing was incomprehensible, while school officials say they weren't left with many options. Joining us from Los Angeles is Dr. Harvey Karp, author of several books on child behavior, including Happiest Toddler on the Block, also available on DVD. Dr. Karp, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You just heard the school officials there saying that this child's mother gave the school strict instructions not to touch her child. So what are school officials supposed to do with someone who has a temper tantrum that lasts this long?
Well, school officials never are supposed to touch kids unless you have to do it to protect their safety or to keep them from being disruptive. And I think that they did a good job in this case, actually. They really only touched her when she was climbing up on top of the table or when she was hitting at them. There are 3 steps to deal with any very disruptive behavior. And these school officials did a couple of them well, and one of them I think they could have done better. The 3 steps are to stop the disruptive behavior. The second is engage emotionally. And the third is to rebuild the rapport. Now, they stopped the behavior. They took her out of the room. They isolated her. They wouldn't let her do dangerous things. I think in terms of engaging emotionally, they could have done a better job to emotionally respond to her, to let her know that they see it from her point of view, rather than just standing over her and saying that's unacceptable behavior, which is hard for a 5-year-old to understand. They could have empathized more and gone, that was really hard, you didn't like that made you so upset. Now, I'm not saying you allow bad behavior, but you at least let them know that you see it from their perspective as well. And the third thing which they did well is to start rebuilding rapport. And that's when they sat her down and they start putting the paper back in the garbage can, or they walk her to the next room. And when she cooperated, they praised her. They said, you made an excellent choice. And I think that was good on their part.
Only on 7 tonight, a mother outraged over her son's arrest at a Detroit school. The teen who has autism allegedly pulled the fire alarm before school police handcuffed him. Even a district spokesperson tells us they do have concerns over how it was handled. 7 Action News reporter Kimberly Craig talked to the teen's mom.
Angela Miller says her 13-year-old son has high-functioning autism, and she says the last thing he needed was to be arrested at school.
I said they put him in what? Handcuffs? No.
Angela Miller couldn't believe what she was hearing. She says her son, who was in the 6th grade here at Thurkel Elementary, was arrested by Detroit Public Schools police and then taken to their station. She says the first person who called her was a police officer.
Well, ma'am, you need to come and pick your son up. I'm like, well, why is he there? Well, you know, he caused a false alarm at school. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? He pulled a fire alarm. I was like, huh?
Angela says she finds it hard to believe that her son would pull a fire alarm because he doesn't like loud noises. And she said her daughter, who was in the same school, told her she didn't hear anything, though we're told it may not ring loudly throughout the school. But Angela said the resource room teacher was supposed to be with her son if his paraprofessional was at lunch. And whatever happened, she said to arrest him and place him in handcuffs was unnecessary. And she says she should have been called so she could talk to her son like she has in other situations.
He's high-functioning autistic, and he does have a history of eloping from the school and tearing bulletin boards down and things of that nature. But at the same time, that's no reason to be tired of him and want him to be arrested.
We reached out to the school district, and a spokesperson confirms Jarrell was arrested because they say he sounded a false alarm, and that's a crime. They said his mother was issued a citation according to district protocol, and they are reviewing the arrest.
They're uneducated, and they don't know how to deal with children on any spectrum of autism.
And if her son is ready to come back to school on Monday, Angela says she wants to sit down and talk to the principal to make sure this doesn't happen again. In Detroit, Kimberly Craig, 7 Action News.
All right, thank you so much, Kim.
America's public schools are failing students in multiple ways. One of the most disruptive is the process by which students are funneled out of the public school system and into the juvenile justice system. It's called the school-to-prison pipeline, and there is increasing evidence that it starts as early as preschool. The school-to-prison pipeline primarily victimizes Black students, trapping them in a cycle of discipline and incarceration, according to Dr. Kenneth D. Waters, diversity educator and researcher.
I want to believe that every student wants to overcome the societal predictions of what's placed on them because of their race, sex, and the socioeconomic status.
Increasingly, schools are cracking down on small offenses, such as cutting class or being disrespectful. This is supposed to discourage more serious infractions, like drug or weapons possession. But what constitutes disobedience or disrespect can be very subjective. A study in Texas found that 97% of the state's suspensions were for subjective reasons, made at the discretion of school administrators. And Black students were 31% more likely to receive discretionary suspensions than white students.
It obviously affects the individual who is actually entering the penal system, but you're affecting communities, you're affecting the economy, you're affecting families, you're affecting school systems.
The disparity can start as early as preschool, when 48% of preschoolers who are suspended more than once are Black. Black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than their white counterparts. And Black girls are suspended at higher rates than girls of any other race.
I want to believe every student is destined for success. They want to achieve, but more times now, we can't control certain things that happen in their homes. I had a student years ago, by the time they got to school, they said, hey, I walked through a crack house facility, prostitution. When I get here, I walk through a metal detector and people bother me. And I haven't eaten since lunch yesterday. And you're asking me to sit here in class and learn? There's a challenge.
When students are kept out of school as punishment, They miss lessons and assignments and fall behind academically. They are also more likely to be disciplined again, which can lead to further problems. The Texas study found that students who had been suspended or expelled were twice as likely to drop out. Adding to the problem, police officers stationed inside schools to prevent serious crimes. When these officers react overzealously to minor infractions, they make small problems worse. Schools with officers have 5 times as many arrests for disorderly conduct as schools without them. But there are solutions.
We need more of our educators to take a genuine interest in the whole student as opposed to what they want to teach on a board and so forth. Do not be quick to actually discipline them, but be more mindful of the predicament they may be coming from and have an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing. Now, I'm not saying take away the discipline, but as you're adding that disciplinary act or that consequence, you're explaining, why am I doing this? You're explaining the reason I am disciplining you is because this happened and this is how you can fix this down the line. I'm showing the genuine interest of actually being restorative and helping you and moving forward so this won't happen again and be repeated.
There are also proactive solutions, including hiring school guidance counselors instead of more police officers. Experts like Kenneth say the best way to prevent incarceration is to provide more equal educational opportunities and to create environments that support all students.
There's no such thing as a nonviolent revolution. The only kind of revolution that's nonviolent is the Negro Revolution. The only revolution based on loving your enemy is the Negro Revolution. That's no revolution. A revolution is loving. Revolution is hostile. Revolution knows no compromise. Revolution overturns and destroys everything that gets in its way. And you sitting around here like a knot on the wall saying I'm going to love these folks no matter how much they hate me.
You call us savages and beasts and mad dogs running the street burning and looting, but we're doing this not for the destruction of the world, but we're trying to prove one point. We want freedom and justice and equality. We want to be treated equal. The best thing to do is give us freedom or at this place will riot with blood.
Here in Detroit, a city of war.